Realm Royale was a victim of being developed by the company that has the worst track record when it comes to corporate mismanagement, and now to nobody's surprise, Realm Royale is dead. All because Hi Rez for some reason decided to go all in on Smite 2, a game that hasn't even proven itself to be a viable cash cow yet, and just completely abandon all the other titles that made them the successful studio that they used to be. And this isn't even the first time that they've done this either. Hi Rez just has a long history of making genuinely fun games across all the different live service genres, just to end up abandoning them. And the thing is that when it comes to Realm Royale specifically, this wasn't just some surface level copy-pasted cash grab or anything. I mean, sure, Hi Rez gets called out for being trend chasers all of the time, but Realm was a really unique battle royale that only existed because the players demanded Hi Rez Studios to make a standalone game after they saw the overwhelming success of Paladin's Battlegrounds. Paladin's Battlegrounds is basically just a small battle royale mode that they were experimenting with inside of their hero shooter Paladins, so Hi Rez took the hero-based mechanics from Paladins and they just stuck them in the battle royale format alongside a class system with unique weapons and abilities, and Realm Royale managed to launch as this weird, chaotic type of fun game for the people who were just tired of all the realistic military shooters that were out there at the time. And oh boy did Realm Royale pop off, because this Paladins Battle Royale spin-off launched at the peak of the Battle Royale craze, and it was so popular that it got over 100,000 concurrent players on release, which was even more players than what Paladins got at its peak, the game that originally inspired it. And if you compared it to the other BR games at the time, Realm Royale was bringing a lot of fresh ideas to the genre. The game had an almost RPG feel to it, with mounts, armor, a forge to craft items, and of course you had the iconic chicken revival system, where instead of getting knocked, you just turned into a chicken and you had the chance to make a comeback if you survived long enough. Which, funny enough, that whole chicken concept comes from my favorite character in Paladins, Pip. But the point is that this game was an instant success. All the major streamers were playing it, people were ranking it in the top BR games at the time, and Hi Rez Studios really did catch lightning in a bottle with Realm Royale. But unfortunately, Hi Rez did what Hi Rez does best, and just mismanaged the hell out of the game with so many terrible updates and core game issues that they ended up driving most of the player base away, to the point where we went from being an actual competitor to Fortnite at the time to where we are now, with Hi Rez laying off so many core developers from their studios, their CEO actually deleting social media to avoid the backlash, and with Realm Royale shutting down on February 17th of 2025. So if you're just watching this video and you were like, oh, Realm Royale, yeah, I remember that game, I should go play it, it's too late. You know, I don't think they're adding an offline mode or anything, the game is just dead. But don't get me wrong here, when a live service game like Realm Royale dies, it isn't because it was inherently a bad game that nobody asked for. I mean, sure, it didn't have enough players to sustain itself over the long run, but Realm Royale died because of a systematic failure inside of Hi Rez itself. Something that's been going on for years at this point, and now we're finally getting to the point where we can see it all crash in real time. And for the people who played a lot of the Hi Rez games throughout the years and you've been seeing them, how they've been getting abandoned one by one, I gotta say, I understand how you feel. Realm Royale was actually one of my favorite battle royales. It's where I got my first ever victory royale back in the day. There's just something to be said about Hi Rez's magic. Like, I don't know exactly what is it that they're putting on the secret sauce, but I just know that they have a pretty good track record when it comes to coming out with games that end up going viral. It's almost always an instant favorite with the community, and even some of their worst performing games like Divine Knockout, for example, which also just died by the way, well, that one even still managed to pull in a dedicated fan base because they're just really that fun to play. The real funny part about Hi Rez though is that they're not really known for how many times they've managed to catch lightning in a bottle with their lineup of solid video games. What they're really known for is how many times they've been able to launch a successful project that just explodes in popularity, only for Hi Rez to be able to fumble over and over and over again what could have been a solid contender in the live service market. I mean, maybe this wasn't going to be the next Fortnite killer or anything, but 20 million players in Realm Royale alone is a ridiculous number. So seeing Hi Rez melting down lately with the company getting hit with their third corporate restructuring, or is it the fourth? It could be the fifth, you know, nobody really knows. And that's because it feels like they happen every other month at this point, you know? Last year, Hi Rez announced that they were shutting down Realm Royale and Divine Knockout. Their most recent one that happened in February basically killed off support for Smite 1, Paladins, and Rogue Company. They're a classic case of a company that specializes in live service games going a little too crazy with expanding into all these different projects, trying to diversify their portfolio while the money's coming in, you know, that's all fine and dandy. It seems like the smart thing to do. But as soon as their infinite money glitch starts to die out, it's nothing but studio layoffs, slowdowns in game updates, and then you just see the downward spiral start taking place. Now for Realm Royale specifically, what exactly went wrong with it? Like, how did the studio manage to fumble a game that was riding the wave of hundreds of thousands of players on launch to the point where they lost over 90% of them in just a few months? Because for context, this is what a healthy live service decline looks like, because you know that they don't really really last forever, but when your chart looks like it just threw itself off a cliff, obviously there's something that the players weren't happy about. And it all goes back to the fact that Hi Rez really wasn't expecting Realm Royale to pop off as hard as it did. Like, remember that all of this started off as a knockoff game mode, and once Realm became its own thing, and it was getting an influx of players, the developers were kind of struggling to figure out what they really wanted Realm Royale to be. Like, they just had no idea what direction to take the game in, so when it came time to start throwing out updates and balance patches, the developers were just going a little crazy on the patch notes, you know, just changing a lot of the game's core mechanics in a way that where if you took a break from Realm and then decided to come back a month or two later, it just felt like a completely different game. Like, for example, you had the different roles that you could pick and play as, like the warrior, the rogue, the mage, the engineer, and they all had their class-specific weapons and abilities that made them different. But then Hi Rez decided to remove the class system from the game, you know, that one thing that made it stand out from every other battle royale that's out there. They scrapped the system entirely, only to add it back 2 months afterwards. And they also got rid of locking class-specific weapons, so you were seeing warriors running around with staves, mages with battle axes, and they also just got rid of the armor system entirely to replace it with a rune system. It really just felt like gambling every time you logged into Realm Royale because you never really knew what they were changing or what they were messing up in the next update, so Hi Rez wasn't really giving the players anything to grasp to, you know, no incentive to keep playing the game since the changes were just happening so quickly. You know, usually if you got a small indie game with a couple of players here and there, sure, you can experiment, you can go a little crazy trying to figure out how to improve the game and try to just make it a better experience overall. You can take more risks that way. But once you hit a certain number of concurrent players and you got so many people hooked on playing your game, well, you kind of have to commit to what you got, you know, because that's what made them pop off in the first place. Hi Rez just kept fumbling the updates over and over again until most of the player base went away, and by January of 2020, Realm Royale was basically abandoned and put on maintenance mode. It's like Hi Rez was just allergic to winning at the time or something, but I will say that they at least did try to fix everything that went wrong with Realm Royale years later in August of 2022, when they re-released Realm Royale as Realm Royale Reforged, which was around the same time that you were getting other re-releases like Overwatch 2, Warzone 2, so Hi Rez just jumped right on that train and they tried undoing all the terrible updates that they did with Realm Royale over the years and bring back some of the mechanics from the early days that people loved. So they reintroduced the armor sets, they brought back class locking so weapons and abilities stay with their respective roles, they added new weapons and class chests, they revived the engineer class, which was scrapped entirely, and on top of that, they had a brand new map. So I do have to give them props for putting in all of that work to try to do good with the players, because when I was trying out Realm Royale Reforged, you know, I gotta say, it was probably the best update they made through the game's entire lifespan. It was a super fun time to play the game, and for the most part, the community loved it too. But despite this reforging being sold as the thing that was gonna bring Realm Royale back into the spotlight, well, this video existing is evidence enough that things really didn't go that way. So the newly reforged Realm Royale only gave them a very minuscule bump in numbers that just died off pretty quickly, and I'm sure that they were expecting to have another explosion in numbers similar to what they got in the first time, but with so many other live service games in the market nowadays, you know, nobody really cared. Sometimes I wish we could just sit here and talk about Hi Rez doing something amazing, like somehow managing to keep that momentum going over the long run, but unfortunately history repeats itself every single time Hi Rez decides to come out with a new game. So with the game shutting down on February 17th, well, that's another one that bites the dust, you know, who knows if Paladins will be next, who knows how long Rogue Company has left, but unfortunately that's just the nature of how live service games work. They're not meant to last forever. And when a game like this one that's had such a solid impact on the players dies, usually it can go one of two ways. Either it's like a last hurrah and everybody gets together to say farewell one last time, kind of like how it happened with Spellbreak for example, or you see them die off with a whimper in the dark corner because literally nobody cared.